It was a Friday night in late October, just a week before Halloween. Sarah and her two best friends, Emma and Michael, had planned a sleepover at Sarah's house. They were excited about the prospect of staying up late, telling ghost stories, and watching horror movies. As the evening progressed, they devoured bowls of popcorn while watching classic scary films. The eerie atmosphere of the movies, combined with the wind howling outside, set the perfect stage for their sleepover. By midnight, they were ready for their traditional round of ghost stories. Emma started first, recounting a tale of a haunted mansion where a ghostly figure roamed the halls. Michael followed with a story about a cursed doll that brought misfortune to anyone who possessed it. Sarah, feeling competitive, decided to tell a story about a mysterious creature that lurked in the woods behind her house. Little did they know, Sarah's story would soon become all too real. Around 2 a.m., after the ghost stories had concluded, they decided to settle in for the night. Sarah's house was old, and its creaks and groans were amplified in the silence of the night. The wind outside had picked up, rattling the windows intermittently. Just as they were drifting off to sleep, Sarah was jolted awake by a faint scratching sound coming from the window beside her bed. She dismissed it as a branch scraping against the glass, but the noise persisted, growing louder and more insistent. Curiosity got the better of her. She quietly slid out of bed and tiptoed over to the window, pulling back the curtain ever so slightly. What she saw made her blood run cold. There, in the moonlit backyard, stood a tall, gaunt figure. Its limbs were unnaturally long and thin, and its skin seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. Two piercing red eyes glowed in the darkness, fixated on the house. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she stumbled back from the window, unsure of what to do. She turned to wake her friends, but as she glanced back at the window, the figure was gone. Frantically, she shook Emma and Michael awake, explaining what she had seen. They were skeptical at first, attributing it to Sarah's overactive imagination fueled by the scary stories they had told earlier. But when they checked the backyard together, they found no trace of anyone or anything. Reluctantly, they tried to calm Sarah down, reassuring her that it was just a nightmare brought on by the spooky atmosphere of the night. Eventually, they all settled back into bed, trying to ignore the lingering unease. As dawn broke and the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, they ventured downstairs for breakfast, trying to shake off the events of the night before. Sarah's parents were already awake, oblivious to the terror that had unfolded just hours ago. Years passed, and they never spoke of that night again. Yet, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the creature she saw was real, lurking somewhere out there in the shadows. And whenever she heard a faint scratching sound at her window, she couldn't help but wonder if it would return. Earlier in 2016, I was having my very first sleepover with a friend of mine at the time. This was at his mother's house, where she no longer lives now. I was still 11 years old, he was a bit younger than me, he also had a younger brother living with him, and my friend didn't get along that well with his younger brother, he still does to this day. Anyway, my parents dropped me off there, we bought lollies, he and I as well as his younger brother went to the nearby stadium, hung out there, we went to the playground of the school next to it and hung out there. My friend made me climb inside a bucket connected to a rope swing, and he dangerously pushed me so high, he was literally out of his mind, and then the bucket snapped off. I was not that happy with him after that. His younger brother was with us, he just watched and laughed, but I let him get away, he was innocent, he didn't really do anything wrong, it was mainly my friend. But that's only the beginning, there's lots more. It was nighttime at the house, me and my friend were watching a movie, his younger brother was in bed, I just wanted to bed. And this is the part where he began making me feel so uncomfortable. He challenged me to eat raw egg, it was so disgusting. He cut open tea bags and challenged me to eat the contents, it was disgusting, and it paid off. I couldn't eat any of the lollies we bought earlier until I did what he challenged me to do. But after that I just wanted to go to bed, but he just wouldn't let me sleep at all, and he started trolling me, by making me think the police was calling us and surrounding the house with some video or app on his tablet. I knew already he was trolling me, and then he turned zombie-like, and obviously it was fake. He was trying to troll me, but he did start feeling a little sick. He went to talk to his mother, and then had a shower. While he was at it, I just grabbed my sleeping bag and mattress and moved into his bedroom. He finished his shower and found me in his bedroom, and immediately agreed we'll just sleep in there. I felt so relieved, I could finally rest for the night proper. The next morning, we went over back to the living room. His younger brother joined us. They both started trolling me again. Well, his younger brother was more innocent, he didn't do very much. The three of us then went out to hang out the nearby stadium again, but then while there, my friend and his younger brother started getting into a heated argument again. My friend had to text his mum several times, and he was just in total rage with his younger brother. We decided we needed to leave the stadium. We departed from a back door, and once we were out, he told me to stay back while he just instant beat up his younger brother, which was actually pretty disturbing. He aggressively beat and wrestled his younger brother, and he was too young for that. He continued to treat his younger brother like a crybaby. His younger brother was powerless to do anything about it, because my friend was the boss. I couldn't do anything either. When we got back to the house, his younger brother told his mom. She had to interview me about what happened. I had tell her everything right there in front of my friend. My friend was put away in his room for a while, and to compensate for what happened to his younger brother, he and I went out and hung out for a while my friend was put away in his room. That was actually a really nice part of the sleepover. After that, I went home. I was so glad to be home after all of this. Well, this happened a few months ago. My cousin went to our house to sleep over and we had fun. We played games, watched movies, and before going to sleep, we watched a scary movie that put everyone to sleep. My 9-year-old cousin suddenly somehow woke up at 3 a.m. and heard weird noises coming outside of our window. It came from our backyard and he kept hearing footsteps. He thought it was an animal at first, but it sounded louder than that. It sounded louder than a man rustling through bushes. He then decided to check outside of the window and saw a very tall and slender figure roaming around our yard. At first, he thought it was a man, but when he looked closer at it, it didn't look human at all. It was making weird noises and sounds throughout the yard. He claimed it had red eyes and was at least a little over 7 feet tall. He was scared, but he thought it was his imagination playing on him. He tried to fall asleep but couldn't. Finally he managed to fall asleep and woke up the next morning. My cousin told my brother everything and my brother told me. I didn't believe him though, since he was only 9 and he was a kid that would sometimes make up things. But he sounded serious. To this day, I still don't believe him, or at least I try not to, and he never heard anything outside of the window since that day. It was supposed to be a fun and carefree sleepover at Megan's house. Megan, Sarah, and Jessica had been friends since childhood, and they loved spending weekends together, especially when Sarah's parents were out of town, leaving them with the whole house to themselves. The evening began with laughter and excitement as they played board games and devoured snacks in the cozy living room. As the night wore on and the clock ticked closer to midnight, they decided to test their bravery with a game of midnight hide-and-seek. Megan volunteered to be the seeker first while Sarah and Jessica hid. The house, an old Victorian with creaky floorboards and dimly lit corridors, seemed to take on a more ominous atmosphere as they turned off most of the lights to intensify the thrill of the game. Sarah found a spot in the walk-in closet of Megan's parents' bedroom, while Jessica squeezed herself under the bed in the guest room, surrounded by forgotten boxes and dusty linens. Megan counted to 50, her voice echoing through the quiet house, while Sarah and Jessica stifled giggles in their hiding spots. But as Megan reached the end of her count and began searching the house, a sense of unease settled over them. Minutes turned into what felt like hours as Megan searched room by room, calling out their names in a playful yet slightly anxious tone. Sarah and Jessica exchanged nervous glances, suddenly feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Just as Megan was about to give up and declare defeat, she heard a soft giggle coming from the basement stairs. Heart racing with excitement, she descended into the dimly lit basement, where old family photographs and forgotten furniture created eerie shapes in the shadows. "Megan, over here," called Sarah's voice from behind a stack of storage boxes. Relieved, Megan approached the boxes, ready to tag Sarah and end the game. But as she reached out, she froze. Sarah wasn't alone. Peeking out from behind Sarah's shoulder was a small, pale face with wide, empty eyes. It was a child, dressed in old-fashioned clothing that looked straight out of a historical photograph. The child's expression was solemn, almost mournful, as if it carried a sorrow that spanned generations. Megan stumbled back in shock, her mind racing with disbelief. Sarah turned around, puzzled by Megan's reaction, but her confusion turned to horror as she saw the ghostly figure standing behind her. Jessica, hearing their gasps from under the bed, crawled out and saw the ghostly child too. Fear gripped all three of them as they backed away slowly, their minds unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. The child's ghost didn't move closer or make any threatening gesture. Instead, it stood there, silently watching them with eyes that seemed to pierce through their very souls. In a panicked frenzy, Megan grabbed Sarah and Jessica's hands, and they sprinted up the basement stairs, the echo of their footsteps mingling with the pounding of their hearts. They didn't stop until they reached the safety of Megan's bedroom, where they barricaded the door and huddled together, trembling with fear and disbelief. The rest of the night passed in a blur of whispered reassurances and nervous glances towards the door. When morning finally dawned, they cautiously ventured out of the bedroom, half expecting to see the ghostly child waiting for them in the hallway. But the house was quiet and still, as if nothing had happened. Megan, Sarah, and Jessica exchanged solemn looks, knowing that they had experienced something inexplicable and terrifying. From that day on, they never spoke of the ghostly encounter again, but the memory haunted their sleepovers like a lingering shadow. And whenever Megan's house grew quiet at night, they couldn't help but wonder if the child's ghost still wandered its halls, searching for peace that had eluded it for so long. It was a chilly autumn night when Alex invited his friends, Ben and Chris, over for a sleepover at his family's remote cabin tucked away in the deep woods. The cabin, weathered by time and surrounded by towering trees, stood silent under a sky filled with stars that seemed to watch over the eerie quiet. Excitement filled the air as the boys unpacked their bags and set up sleeping bags in the cozy living room. They joked and teased, discussing plans for the night that included scary movies and tales of the supernatural. As darkness settled in and the wind outside whispered through the leaves, they gathered around a crackling fire in the fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Ben, known for his fascination with the paranormal, began to share a local legend he had heard about the cabin. A family had lived in the cabin and vanished without a trace during a stormy night. Since then, strange occurrences had been reported, whispers in the wind, flickering lights seen through the trees, and eerie figures glimpsed in the moonlit darkness. Chris, usually skeptical, chuckled nervously, but Alex couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine. They dismissed Ben's tale as mere folklore meant to spook them, but as the hours passed and the wind howled louder, an unsettling tension hung over the cabin. Around midnight, after watching a particularly chilling horror movie, they decided to play a game of hide-and-seek in the dimly lit woods surrounding the cabin. Chris volunteered to be it first while Alex and Ben disappeared into the darkness, their flashlights cutting through the dense underbrush. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Chris counted to 50, his voice carrying through the stillness. Alex found a hiding spot behind a fallen log, while Ben climbed into an old hunting blind that creaked with every movement. As Chris wandered deeper into the woods, his flashlight casting eerie shadows among the trees, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig made his heart race with nervous anticipation. Suddenly, Chris froze in his tracks as he heard a soft, plaintive voice calling his name from a distance. "Chris, over here." His breath caught in his throat. He swung his flashlight toward the direction of the voice, but the beam only revealed the swaying branches and the darkness beyond. "Guys, very funny," Chris called out, hoping it was just a prank. But there was no response, just the whispering wind and the distant hoot of an owl. With a sinking feeling in his gut, Chris began to backtrack towards the cabin, his mind racing with fear. As he approached the edge of the woods, he stumbled upon Alex and Ben, their faces pale and wide-eyed. "Did you hear that voice?" Chris whispered urgently. Alex nodded solemnly. "I heard it, but I thought it was one of you." Ben shook his head. "I've been here the whole time." They exchanged nervous glances, their thoughts racing back to Ben's story about the cabin's haunted past. Without another word, they hurried back to the safety of the cabin, locking the door behind them and huddling together in the living room, their minds filled with unanswered questions and growing unease. The rest of the night passed in tense silence, each boy listening intently for any sign of the mysterious voice or other strange occurrences. When dawn finally broke, they ventured outside cautiously, half expecting to see something waiting for them among the trees. But the woods were silent and still, as if whatever had spoken to them had melted back into the shadows. They never spoke of that night again, but the memory of the haunting voice lingered in their minds, reminder that some mysteries are better left undisturbed in the depths of the woods.